Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Slice of Wisdom podcast. On today's episode, we have Marc Rhodes. When I was thinking about starting up this podcast, I knew for sure that Marc was one of the people I wanted to have on sooner rather than later. Marc has done some incredible challenges that you're going to hear all about, and he has a thorough knowledge of sports science, mental performance, and much more. So, without further ado, let's dive into conversation with the one and only Marc Rhodes. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Slice of Wisdom podcast. Today's title is How Does Regularly Self-Inflicting Hardship Set You Apart from the Rest? And today on the podcast we have Marc Rhodes. Marc, first question. What's your life been like up to now?
Undulating, I think, is probably the best word. Lots of really cool highs, unique moments, things that I'll treasure. Also, really challenging lows, setbacks, failures, rejections. And I don't think that's unique to me. I think that's pretty much every bloke who strives to do, be, and achieve better. But I think, pretty undulating up until this point. Yeah.
Can you give us a background of your upbringing, your earlier life?
For sure. So it depends how far back you want to take it, but I'll start right at the very beginning. Something I've spoken about before, and I'm very comfortable speaking about it, is that I was actually an illegitimate concealed birth. So what that essentially means is I was given birth to in secret in a living room, believe it or not. I don't remember it, obviously, but there's transcript and documents and stuff that were made available to me in later life, and left in a cardboard box outside Spalding Hospital in Lincolnshire to basically be like, right, someone else's problem now, crack on. So as a result of that, didn't grow up with my sort of biological family, bounced around a little bit, and then found myself growing up on a farm in rural Lincolnshire. In hindsight, it was a really cool experience that no one really is appreciative for when you're a kid, because you just want to have mates and do that sort of stuff. But it was a pretty challenging childhood. I don't own the intellectual property rights for a difficult childhood, but it was pretty challenging from an emotional standpoint. From that, discovered rugby, and rugby was really where I started to kind of take a bit of a turn in understanding what a strong male role model might look like in some of my coaches and other guys in the team. And I really enjoyed playing rugby for an extended period of time. That then got me into university, where, to be honest, I was a total piss can. like many of us were probably on a university experience, total piss can. But I look back now and realise that's because I wasn't happy and I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. I was doing what I thought I should be doing. So in my second year, after a long-lasting interest, it was beyond even an interest, actually. It was kind of like an obsession with the military. And that's when I applied for Sandhurst, to go to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. Finished my degree, got basically a deferred pass for Sandhurst. And being an impatient individual, I was like, I want to get amongst it straight away. So this was back in the day before Capita and all that sort of good stuff, where you could basically close down one application, move it across to an enlistment and pursue it from that point on. So I enlisted in Para. I got medically discharged in 2012 from depot. And then it was pretty much that, right, plan A didn't go to according to plan with regards to rugby and that sort of stuff and getting a degree. Plan B, a career in the military, also didn't go to plan. We're kind of running out of ideas now. Now what? And it was actually then when someone mentioned to me about becoming a PT, and to be fully transparent, I had no idea what a PT was. I was in a smoking shelter at Helly's Barracks in Carrick, and I was like, what? People will pay you to just watch them fizz? I was like, What the fuck is a crack with that? But the one conjoining factor in my life that far had been like hard training, enjoying hard training, thinking about it, talking about it, planning, helping others, giving little bits of insight as and when I could. I was like, this actually kind of makes sense. So I got myself onto that qual. So literally straight out of discharge, into working as a PT, and then things really started to gather momentum. So then got myself on an internship at Notts Trent University, was working in their high performance center, really like kind of thriving business. Moved then to Manchester, and it took on another gear again. And then that was sort of the advent of the online coaching. That was when it was just becoming a thing. Prior to that, it was just dodgy geezers selling spreadsheets. Well, it still partially is now, to be fair, but back then it was a wild west. Yeah, it really was a wild west. But I went about it what I believe to be the correct way. Got mentors, really kicked the arse out of it. And that takes us kind of professionally, at least, to present day. In between that, there's been some races, there's been some cool experiences as well. But as an overview, broad strokes, that's day one to where we are now.
So going on to that, where you are now, how do you describe what you do when you meet someone for the first time?
This is what I've spent like 5 years of my life trying to create. Ironically, someone who I respect tremendously, who's successful in their own right, actually said to me, if you can describe your job in like an elevator pitch, which you're supposed to be able to do, it means what you do is fucking boring. Because what you're doing is you're just giving them an anchor around which they can wrap their understanding of the world, and then they're quantifying you based on their understanding of what you're communicating. Whereas if you have to go into some degree of nuance and it's new and unheard of and they don't have anything they can align that with, it's unpredictable. They're like, oh, I've never heard of that. And there's an immediate curiosity and you're exploring new horizons. So that might sound a little bit esoteric, but that's something I run with. But first principle, if you wanted to put something on the boilerplate, it would be mental and physical health and performance for aspirational guys. That's what we do.
And then going into your endurance side, your more personal side.
Yeah.
Let's hear about that.
Yeah. So I was fit for purpose when I was playing rugby, but I was built like a thumb, mate. I mean, I still am, but like I genuinely look like a potato. Then when I decided I wanted to go down the military route, I was like, right, I used to play in the front row, as play hooker. So, repeated sprint ability, strength, etc. weren't actually a prerequisite. Back in the day when you're talking about power edge, it was just the ability to crack a really fast PFA basically and then tab. So I had to lose a lot of weight. Got, I say really quite fit, got just fit enough, like an at-risk pass. Got just fit enough. And kind of enjoyed training in that way. And that's really when I first started to feel excited by training, because I grew up in Lincolnshire, which is flatter than a witch's tit. There's nothing going on. Like there's nothing good to look at, so to speak. So then, getting taken on AT trips to Kendal on the Lake District, I was like, this is fucking mega. Like I really enjoy this. Consequently, even after that all sort of came crashing down with like my personal training career and working in strength and conditioning, I was always interested in like pushing the envelope and doing stuff of that nature. So brief stint back in rugby, and it just was it wasn't going to marry up with what I needed to do to grow my coaching business. So then I started to look into jiu-jitsu, trained jiu-jitsu on and off for quite some time now. And that's the same, I feel, with most guys who train jiu-jitsu. It's normally the last thing that you add in and the first thing that gets taken away when you're mega busy. And I think we've just got to be respectful of that. And it just is where it is for most people. But I got into jiu-jitsu, trained at some incredible gyms, still do it a bit down here now in Poole as well, which I do really enjoy when I get that opportunity to. But it wasn't till about 3 years ago that I really started pressing the send button on ultra endurance. I actually learned about the MDS, or the Marathon des Sables, when I was at Depot. I remember there was a captain and he'd just come back from doing it and finished like fucking top 10 or something, and there was like an aura around him, like fucking hell, he is like unbelievably sexy. So that was years and years ago, like 2011 2012, that it got brought into my consciousness. And then when I found myself in a position of life where I was like, I've got no real reasons why I can't do it, I've got the means, I've got the fucking vehicle, like why don't I do it? Percolated with the idea until eventually I was like, you know what, fuck it, we're doing it. And then I entered, and then it was kind of a case of fuck around and find out. Realized that in the build up and in the training for that, I was actually able to marry together a multitude of things I enjoy, that being spending time in the mountains. It legitimized going to the mountains and basically just fucking doing whatever you want for a weekend. You get to train hard, you get to eat whatever you want. So it kind of married together some of my passions. And that's when I first got into ultra, mate. Well, yeah, that was believe it or not, my first ever ultra distance race ever. People think you have to have like a lineage and a pedigree to be able to do that. I was like, you just got to be necky enough.
At first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you just explain to listeners then which ones you've done and what they consist of?
So at the time of recording this, I have now done some normal ultras, some sort of 50Ks. I actually cracked my first ever 30 miler just as a training run around Windermere in the Lake District because it was part of my training build up for the Marathon des Sables. So that was the first really spicy ultra that I did, was the Marathon des Sables, which is 250 kilometers or 6 marathons in 5 days across the Sahara Desert, self-supported. So you're carrying your own medical supplies, sleeping equipment, food. And it's broken down into stages. That's what multi-stage means. So stages are between sort of 42 kilometers and 93 was our longest day. And it is fucking well hot. Yeah.
Absolute redders.
Yeah. So that was 2023. And that's when I kind of got the bug for ultra endurance. I didn't think that I would. I thought it would be a one and done. It's just ticking the box of life, something I always really, really wanted to experience. But those experiences, in my honest opinion, are so unique that there's only one way you're going to get them, both in terms of experientially connecting with other people in a really meaningful way. Because other than people in, the tip of the spear organizations, when do you really get the opportunity to disappear into the ether where they're blocking the signal? So you've got no fucking phone, like you've got no TV, you've got nothing to distract you. You're just basically in a tent with other blokes going through the same hard stuff.
Rawest form.
Yeah, and it's really, really, really powerful. And actually, I find it's addictive. Once you've kind of spanned your nervous system down from modernity and you've had that amazing experience, as much as it's a lick, the race is actually the easiest part of the entire process, because during your sort of working day, you've got to be up early and crack like first PT session, and then you're straight into like, right, showered, dressed, coffee, Zoom calls, meetings, like just daily life. Then it's right back into PT, out again in the cold and dark, getting another run done. Then it's like adminning yourself, preparing for tomorrow, stretching. You get half an hour time to yourself. Then it's that day in, day out, day in, day out. Whereas when you're on the race, it's like, yeah, okay, so you've got a hard bit of jogging in the heat to do. But after that, you just sat in a tent chatting shit with your mates.
Yeah. And
there's no meetings, there's no calls, there's fuck all to do other than be fully present. So the race is just like a box ticking exercise, in my personal opinion. So I did the MDS and then got the itch. And that's when I signed up for the jungle, because I thought the jungle was going to be the one thing that's going to be like more disgusting than that. So therefore it's going to offer more opportunity to grow and learn more shit. And I was right, it is well more disgusting. It's truly hideous. Anyone who's been to the jungle, that kind of secondary jungle where you've got primary canopy, triple canopy, it's just hot, it's humid. It was in Peru, so you're at altitude. My pack weight was like 16 kilos because I have an enormous sweat rate, because when you go through heat acclimation, your sweat rate increases. So I was man packing 6 litres of water between every checkpoint. And then on top of all that personal admin, you've got your medical considerations in the jungle. Any cut you get gets infected fucking immediately, and you'll get covered in them. I got infected sunburn on my chest, ants, various bits of wildlife, all that sort of stuff to deal with. It was really difficult, but equally amazing. It was a really, really cool experience. So the last sort of environment that I want to get dealt with will be the ice. So that'll be similar distance, 230 kilometers, 5 days in the Arctic Circle of Sweden. The jungle was 230 kilometers in the Amazonian rainforest. And then I think that'll be it.
Yeah, we say that now.
Yeah.
So let's go into the ice ultra, the look forward.
Yeah.
Obviously these races, as you kind of said already, is a sprint finish of a long road of hard work behind the scenes. Where do you even begin to prepare for a challenge like this?
It sounds trite, but it's all in the top 2 inches, like the beginning of the preparation, because to the greatest extent, training is going to be long and boring. And I was waiting when I was training for the MDS for like one individual session or 1 week that was going to buckle me and be like, fucking hell, this is nails. And it never came. But then I still finished sort of top third on the MDS. And I was like, maybe it's not all that. And that's going to sound, to some listeners, that's going to make total sense. Like, yeah, it's not fucking that bad. It's not that hard. Get over it. To others, it's going to sound like you're a lunatic. How can you say that's not that hard? But the reality is, every session was stimulating, not annihilating. It's incremental hardship. So, obviously you've been through Limpston. It's the same. Like, yeah, it's hard and the curve is fast, but it's progressive overload. It's getting incrementally harder. And you've got a preset time parameter and you've got to be at a set standard. That no such standard exists for a self-motivated race. You don't have to hit certain timings, certain paces. Like, you just have to be able to get around it. And it's in your own mind to be really honest with yourself and your intentions. Like, right, am I racing? Am I a completer or a completer? And I was like, well, I want to be a completer. So I'm looking at, middle third, I'll be happy. So I have to train according to that. I have to break down the goals. I have to break down the train. I have to break everything down and look at how am I going to approach this. For me, there was the added spice of basically announcing that I'm going to do the hardest race, supposedly the hardest foot race on earth, announcing that to like 50,000 people. That adds a bit of pressure, especially when formerly my coaching organization was called the Hard to Kill program. And I'd already preempted, I'm going to get all these people, because the more you grow and the more you talk about certain things, the bigger the target you paint on your back, the more people that want to see you fail. And that's just the reality of it. There's no way around that. No one's universally liked. You could save a kid from a burning building and someone would still call you a pedo. It's just the reality of it, right?
Yeah.
You could walk on water and people say it's because you can't swim. So what that does is it forces you to either try and avoid it, which tends to break people because they're trying to avoid their own thoughts, which is not advisable. Or you have to sit and face, like, right, what's worst case scenario? And then what that allows you to do is make a commitment and a promise to yourself of, right, I'm not promising it's going to be fast. I'm not even promising myself that I'm going to finish, because there's variables outside of my control that would take me off the race. Could go down with heat stroke. One lady in a sandstorm, one of the big tent pegs got ripped out of the floor, smashed her in the grid, broken orbital socket, gone. And you never even got to touch the start line. These things can happen. So you can't even promise you're going to finish it. But you can make a commitment and a promise to yourself that I'm going to do my utmost every day to complete the tasks that are in front of me to the very best of my ability. And if you can pass that mirror test every day, you're golden. There's nothing more you can do. And then you can kind of resign to any additional pressure and you can surrender. And if people are going to have a pop, you say, oh, I thought he was going to do faster, I thought he was going to do this, that, and the other. I genuinely did the best I could. And I know that I did. If you can beat it, feel free.
Yeah.
That's it allows you. Yeah. So you gotta look at the top 2 inches first, and then the training is an opportunity to get the body ready, but also deal with it with the mind as well. I say to everyone, these kind of races or arduous courses, you've got two packs, rucks, Bergens, whatever you call them. You've got two. You've got one that's physically on you, and obviously we want to try and get that as light as possible and as well administrated as possible. But the one that people fail to think about is the fucking baggage up here. And if you're carrying self-applied pressure, perfectionism, any of those sorts of things, they're just heavy and they'll just weigh you down and slow you down and exhaust you. And then you'll just wrap when you didn't need to. So it's about keeping that empty. So every time you're training, you're out running, you're dealing with those thoughts and just kind of getting rid of that fucking baggage, getting rid of that weight and keeping your mind healthy.
It's concentrating the process rather than the outcome, isn't it?
Yeah.
That keeps you sane.
Yeah.
I want to bring the sports scientist side out of you here and pick your brains. How does your build fare for you within ultras? You said you built like a thumb, and you haven't got the let's say blueprint of the like a runner.
Yeah.
So how does it fare for you?
There are some ways to which it is disadvantageous. So you don't have the top speed of some of the racing snakes, but when you know that, again, you've got to have an honest conversation with yourself. And we do this with all clients we work with in Uncharted. And obviously I'm no stranger to doing that with myself. Is that right? What are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats? And if your strength is you are a donkey, then play to your strength. If you're a donkey, don't get in a race with a fucking racehorse, right? Yeah. You've got to try and find a way that you're going to turn out your advantage. And fortunately, multi-stage racing is much less about top-end speed, and it's more about versatility, robustness, and consistent pace. So if you're strong, play to it, because that's going to mean your knees, your ankles, your hips, all these things are just more robust. So therefore, you're going to be able to maybe carry more weight without as much stress on the neural system or the physiology, which means that you can carry more food, which means you can recover faster, which means you can push harder. So all these things start to get built into your race strategy. and I won't mention names because it's not fair or appropriate, but there were two guys in the top 5 of the jungle, and they're incredible athletes, and I've got love for both of them. And I'm not saying their preparation wasn't apt or personalized to them, but they were in the top 5 until the last day. The last day is 75 kilometers over the biggest mountain you've done all week. And I came from mid-pack and beat both of them because their knees gave out. Because that race is unique in that the first 2 days is 50 kilometers all downhill. It's fucking disgusting and that's your heaviest pack weight. Because obviously on a self-supported race, you're eating food, you're using medical supplies, so your pack's getting lighter as you go on. So you're doing 50k downhill, and it just fucking pumps your knees. So if you haven't worked on downhill run technique, and if you haven't worked on like robustness of your VMO, the patella and quadricep tendons, the Achilles, all that sort of stuff, then those tendons just get smashed. And consequently their pace degraded, and then coming down those really hard descents. I think one guy had an issue with his patella, basically malaligned, so it was just his patella was on the wonk. So trying to go downhill with that in the dark was not good. Yeah, and another guy I think partially tore his quadricep tendon, which is awful. You could hear him screaming from like an hour away. it was brutal. So that could be bad luck, but I genuinely believe that you make your own luck by how you prepare. So if you're a donkey and you can carry weight, you can keep a consistent pace, and you can just be a tractor, play to that. Because there's a lot more lads, I would say, built like I am than built like racing snakes. So play to your strengths. And then if you can tolerate the work volume, know that ultra endurance or any endurance is not a weeks and month long adaptation. It's years and decades. So if you can go back to back to back and start stringing together big training blocks, you will naturally get faster. You will just naturally get faster.
So you got the experience of doing it yourself. How did you get into, we've already spoken about the PT, but let's go and delve into your coaching side.
Yeah.
How did you get into the passion of encompassing this into others?
Yeah. So if we go back to when I was sort of medically discharged, my honest belief is that medical discharge may not have happened if I was appropriately physically prepared. But, back when I was going through that system, you'd go through was ADSC, and then it was prac. I mean, you're Navy side, so it was different for you, but you'd go through ADSC, which is like Army Development Selection Center. If you got beneath a certain run time and over a certain standard, then you would be invited to apply for para. So I did that, and then you go on prac, which is a 3 or 4 parachute regiment aptitude course, 3 or 4 days of just getting familiarized with the area, get smashed basically, getting introduced to the steeplechase and a few of the different bits. And then you're basically just left on your onesie to prepare until you come back to start depot. When I say this, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody involved in it. Not that they'll probably be consuming this, but there is no appropriate physical robustness preparation. I think now guys like Mike Chadwick have had a huge intervention. I know the Corps is probably a little bit different in their approach to things, but from the Army side, it was literally just running and tabbing and remedial circuits day in, day out. So blokes break. And I understand that there needs to be a level of hardship and a level of robustness, but my argument would have been at the time, if you prepare more people, then you're going to get more people who have the right aptitude getting through because their body's not going to wrap on them. So that's what inspired me to learn about the mechanisms and the structures and physiology. And to be transparent, it took me a while. I was salty about my MD for a good few years, mate. Like, I was fucking pissed off about it. But it is what it is. And because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I was now. So that's what first got me into strength and conditioning and learned about systems and how to fortify them and how energy systems and all that sort of stuff works. Then as I became more mainstream and was working with a much more generalized cohort of the population, I realized that the thing that was impairing their ability to excel was not the vehicle, it was the driver. So I was like, right, if we want to improve people and we want to create excellence, whatever your definition of that is, then we need to look at the operating system and why it's not fully engaged with the process. And 9 times out of 10, that is an amendable system flaw. That is a limiting belief that can be understood, analyzed, interpreted, and interventions can be made. And then when you reassemble and resynthesize that structure and put it back into a stress, it performs better, just as the body can. So then I started to get really very passionate about that. having the background I had in S&C, I was like, right, that knowledge is where it needs to be for most standards. So then I learned into studying NLP. So got my NLP masters. From that, then I started working and shadowing kind of therapists, and then studied CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, which is fundamentally the process of reframing things. And then from that, I was fortunate enough to study with an organization called the Flow Research Collective. So that's run by a guy called Stephen Kotler, and they embed into US Naval Special Warfare Command, so WARCOM, so the SEAL teams, into Harvard and Google. And I studied neuroscience, which is still an emerging field, but essentially we're looking at neurochemical and consequent downstream behaviors, motivation, flow, all those kind of things. And I studied that. And then I've begun to plug that into my coaching practice. So, we've got a vast capability when it comes to fortifying and enhancing performance in a human system. And then we can also tap into the driver and make sure the driver, to use an F1 analogy, is prepared to fucking accelerate hard and brake late into the corners. That's what we need to achieve. Because if you've got the best race car in the world, but the driver's afraid of the gas pedal, you're still not going to win the race. So we have to look at both facets of that. And that's how I believe we get the results that we do, is we're, to use the phrase I don't like, we're holistic. We look at it from a broad spectrum, and then we dive into, right, these are the areas that need to be improved upon.
So how I'm looking to join, what do you provide your members? So if someone's looking to join, what are you going to give to them?
It's a really good question. So it honestly begins with interviewing. We don't interrogate people, but what we're looking to understand are the 4 C's of like character, capability, capacity, and commitment. And if those things are where we need them to be, then we can have conversations about where are you currently. Because in order for coaches to do their job to the very best of their ability, they have to know that the person's committed and not a flight risk. And that's just the honest truth. Because you're going to invest a lot of time into them, and you're going to basically we create for every individual client an annual training plan. So it doesn't mean they're going to have to be there for a year, but we create plan A of like, right, if everything goes our way based on what you've discussed as of highest degree of importance to you, this is where you're at, and this is where we foresee you can be over the next 12 months. And then we have processes to get you through that. So it begins with assessments. So psychometric and physiological assessments that basically create parameters of where you are now, and then look at meeting you where you're at. So we assess the psychometrics based on a few different algorithms and schools of thinking, most of which is influenced by a brilliant doctor called Carol Dweck from Stanford University on growth mindedness, just to see where you're currently at, because we deliberately want to substantiate our claims. Like, one of my pet peeves that fucking nauseas me is coaches talking about mindset because they read the Chimp Paradox and they can tell you to crack on. It's like, fuck off, right? Or you get like mindset or mental performance coaching organizations that don't substantiate their claims and are just giving you bullshit. Like, or journal every day for 3 months.
Regurgitating
what am I writing about? Like, my coach is a knob. Like, what am I supposed?
Yeah.
So we deliberately substantiate that. And the same with the physiologicals as well. And those test batteries will be informed by, again, our assessments of you. So, if, for example, you want to run an ultra, the energy systems we need to train, the movement fidelity we need to produce, the robustness we need to focus on, it's going to be very different from someone who maybe wants to be a competitive jiu-jitsu athlete. So we've got to look at you as an individual, which we do. Then we create plan A, and then you're into the sort of pattern of life. So all of your strength and conditioning, it will at first be somewhat dictatorial of like, hey, here's what we need to do. Then once an individual's built a certain capacity and experience, then it can be a lot more democratic. But all lifestyle factors and variants are kind of built into those situational constraints. So all this strength and conditioning, nutrition, again, there's a phasic approach. So meeting you where you're at and beginning to upskill you on the science of nutrition and the application of that. And then top 2 inches education as well. So there is a syllabus. There's a 14-week foundations phase in that by design is designed to bring you up to kind of a baseline. And that's not to teach people to suck eggs, but it's like, if we don't have certainty in what we would refer to as fundamental skills, like reframing, like managing your own time to extraordinarily high standards under stress and duress, if we don't have those capabilities in place, then any of the more, I'm going to say, advanced stuff is as much use as tits on a fish, because everything's going to break and crumble underneath, and we're going to regress then to a baseline standard. So the first thing we're focused on doing is not actually raising the roof, it's raising the floor, so that even your baseline standard is an aspirational standard that most people can't even hit. So you understand how to uphold that baseline standard, and then we can start having discussions about raising the roof and really beginning to maintain that. The challenge for most people is they're capable of incredible feats of strength, endurance, and performance for short periods of time. So their life just looks like this. There's huge oscillations, and it's in these downturns that not only are they not performing to the standard they want to, they also then have the curse of consciousness where they're like, I'm a fucking shit house. I'm sick of my life being up and down. I'm so frustrated. I'm going to have to get back on the wagon again. And that becomes incrementally more damaging every time that happens. And the friction to start again gets greater. So if we can take those oscillations from that to like this, there's always going to be oscillations. There's always going to be vacillations. That's the nature of human life. But if we can get it from that to that and it's trending up, bingo. That's the whole game.
Yeah, it comes from people with the oscillations of, it's kind of, they try it too quick. They want to turn stuff around too fast. They put themselves into situations, and let's say like if they want to lose weight, calorie deficit, and they'll pick like 800 calorie difference. Yeah. And then they'll won't hit it. They'll then reach self-loathing like, I've messed it up again, and then go back down. Yeah.
So that's definitely a component part of that. And ultimately, we have the conversation of consistency versus intensity. And honestly, this follows on from what I was saying about ultra endurance and it not ever being that hard. The intensity required to be successful in the long term is far lower than people perceive. So people perceive you need to really want it, you got to work hard, and you got to grind, you got to graft. There's a time for that. If you've built the capacity to tolerate that work. If you haven't, and you set off on an intensity trajectory like that, it's going to have to fucking drop off. And then when it drops off, if you haven't got those baseline standards, it will just skyrocket back to the floor. That's why we see this all or nothing mentality. And again, coming back to why the top 2 inches is so important, it's the ability to transcend in those moments, to take a condor moment and be like, right, am I seeing things in a truthful way? Am I dealing with challenging emotions about what I believe to be true about myself when things aren't going my way? If the answer is yes, cool, we've got to now regulate. But most people are just fucking so absorbed in being intense. They're putting so much pressure on themselves that they literally like go so fucking granular on the problem set, they're failing to see the big picture. And if you can find a way, like if in doubt, zoom out. And when you zoom out, it's like, right, is having Christmas dinner going to be the end of me? Right, am I now a fat shithouse because I had that? No. Right, one meal will not make you skinny. One meal will not make you fat. So that's like a really micro example of that. So if in doubt, zoom out. If you're feeling a lot of pressure, if something feels all right and you feel stressed, that's your like self-awareness fucking radar going off. So zoom out, what emotions have I got? And people are uncomfortable still talking about emotions. Whether you like it or not, you do things or avoid things based on how you feel about them. That's the fucking honest truth. They're wildly more powerful than people give them credit for. We just don't want to say we're emotional beings, but when you're hungover, what do? Overeat because you want comfort. Okay, when you're stressed, what do? You overeat because you want comfort. Or you stop eating because you can't eat because your emotions are high. When emotions are high, intelligence is low. So we have to learn to regulate the emotions in an effort to make intelligent fucking decisions about long-term progress. So most people set off an intensity that's just not appropriate for, like, imagine the best analogy, imagine setting off on a 50 miler at your 5k pace. That's what most people are doing, and then just spanking in after 6k and wondering why, and then having to go back to the start line. So be aware of what you're trying to achieve, and that's our job as coaches to say, right, this is your ATP, your annual training plan that I spoke about. This is what we perceive as the runway with some baked in fudge factor. So this is the level of intensity we need you at. From a training, from education, from a regulatory standpoint, this is the level of intensity you need to be at. And one thing most people are shy of is taking enough time off. Like white space and time off and fun can be really protective to all of your effort.
The balance. Yeah. I want to come back to that later.
Yeah.
Mate, men choose you to be their coach because you're a role model that boasts mental resilience and physical robustness, which are very desirable traits among men. Coming away from providing inspiration to others, who do you look up to?
It's a really good question. I think I've been asked that. It might have actually been you who asked it before.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And my answer will be pretty similar, although it's going to seem really self-indulgent and arrogant now. Growing up, I wouldn't be ashamed to say I didn't have anyone to look up to. Did not have that. One of the first people that I really looked up to was someone that showed belief in me before I even believed in myself. And it was a business mentor. I won't mention his name, but it was a business mentor. And he believed in me more than I actually believed in myself. And consequently, I achieved like tremendous success over a few years. And I started to then believe in myself. And then I started to invest in my own mental performance coaches and that sort of stuff. And it was through those conversations, they led me to understand that my next greater challenge in life was to create the role model that I always needed for myself. So I don't want it to seem self-indulgent or arrogant, but the person I try to inspire the most is myself. The person I try to be inspired by most is myself. Now, what stops it from being arrogant, I perceive, is that those conversations go on in between my own two ears, and that's it. It doesn't go any further. It doesn't need to go any further. It's self-reflective practices in the journal. It's, speaking to the people who are really close to me, there's like 2 or 3 like people in the world, and trying to find a way to talk to myself about being proud of what I've done and become, I don't want to sound dramatic, but the father that never had. And that's increasingly common in men we work with, is setting a good example for themselves. So they are the man that they always wanted to be when they were like 5 or 6 years old. They are the man they always wanted and needed in life when they were younger. And that sounds quite spiritual and quite fucking woo and out there, but those people who have done the work to get to that point, or might be latching onto that, like, I understand what he's talking about. Now, outside of that, I genuinely look up to a lot of clients that we work with because they're fucking heavy hitters. They achieve incredible things. Anyone who's done something as an act of endurance, or it's a fucking risk being an ambitious human in today's world. It's a fucking risk because you've got a target on your back. So anyone who stands out as like, I've taken the risk of being me and going for it, I genuinely have inspiration. And even clients, when they say, oh, I work with you because you inspired me to do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, well, given your circumstance and what you've had to overcome to put yourself in this environment, I'm actually pretty fucking taken back by the fact you've done that as well. So there's no one direct character at this moment. That might change. You're always meeting new people and people are coming into your life. There's a lot of people that that encourage me to take a step back and be like, fucking hell, wow. Like what he's able to achieve, and it doesn't have to be Herculean feats of endurance, just what they've able to, they've taken the risk of going for more in their situation of constraint is inspiring. So there's a lot of those kinds of people. And then, there's the people I'm fortunate enough to call friends, guys like Stas, who's had a fucking tremendous career in the military and then set up arguably the most successful UK outdoor clothing brand in the UK. And I'm like, and he's just the most straight talking, honest, down to earth, nice guy, do anything for everybody. They also inspire me. So it's definitely an amalgam of those things.
Yeah, it's good because I've been thinking about this recently, and it's like you take traits that you desire and how you like yourself to be perceived. Yeah. So you pick and choose from people that. Yeah. That's why you like people, because you see traits which you are favourable of. So what are some of the values that you carry through the rough days where you aren't performing at your best or you've got wavering motivation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually spoke to my clients about this on Monday. I actually don't care about performance. And when I say that out loud, a lot of people laugh and then they're like, oh, wait, you're actually being serious. I don't care about performance. And in my honest opinion, most people should stop caring about performance as well. Because what I care about, exactly to your point, are the traits that eventually elicit performance. And I think front and center of those is honesty. Being able to be honest with yourself about how much of this is true and how much of this is a little story I've made up because it makes it sound like I'm the hero and I tried really hard, but I couldn't achieve it for X, Y, and Z reason. Most of the time, the things that are keeping men stuck in place is the stories we craft. And if you're not fortunate enough to have guys around you who will call you out on your bullshit, then you'll never get called out on those stories and you'll never realize that you could have been excellent, but you were just listening to your own bullshit. And you can't lie to anyone else before you've lied to yourself first, but most people don't spot that it's a lie. I think front and center, I really care about honesty. In that conversation, I also care about creating opportunities for myself that I would have always wanted when I was younger. Like if you'd have told me when I started my coaching career that I would call some of the people I now have as friends, I'd be like absolutely jizzing my pants. Yeah. And creating those opportunities for yourself. I care about then maximizing my ability to capitalize on the opportunities as and when they arise. I care about doing the right thing, otherwise known as integrity, to the very best of your ability every single time that you can. And you're going to get stuff wrong. You're going to fuck up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make bad decision calls. All those things are going to happen. But if you care about that honesty, about self-compassion, about not beating yourself up because you made a mistake, if you care about all those things I've just listed, then by default you get performance. But you don't get performance for the sake of performance. You get purposeful, passionate, sustained performance because it actually fucking matters, because you understand what you're in the game for and what you're playing for. So I think I've gone off topic from the question then, but yeah, you might have to refresh my memory of that question.
Some values that you carry through the rough days. I think you have answered.
Yeah, so honesty is the main one. Like being able to sit with yourself, either literally looking in the mirror or metaphorically having a chat with yourself in the journal and being like, right, how much of this is actually hard and how much of I just fucking blag myself? And me, I'm no different to anybody else. I struggle with perfectionist tendencies as well. Like if conditions aren't perfect going into a run test, I'll start coming up with narratives of like, oh, well, my legs are heavy because I had a run yesterday, or fucking the weather's really strong, it's taking time off me, or my heart rate's higher. And you come up with all this shit. And then in the moment, you got to catch yourself and be like, right, how much of this is actually detrimental and how much of this is making a story so that I can blag why it was harder for me? And we all want to think it's harder, but it's our ego. It's just our ego. And the more aware of that you are, generally the better you will do, because as we spoke about, most people perceive the intensity is not appropriate for a timeline. So when you stop trying to be a fucking superhero and just turn up and do the work, you just got to keep having those self-regulatory conversations. The difference between regulation and rumination is intent and duration. So if the intent is just dragging yourself over the coals and it happens consistently, that's going to be rumination, and that's one of the leading causes of depression. Whereas if it's honest reflection of like, did I do the best I could? Yes or no? No. Cool. What do we do? Like what now needs to be sustained and what can be developed off the back of that? That's healthy reflection, and we need that. But we have to call it when it becomes rumination. And again, I've ruminated. Of course I have. We all do. But being aware to catch that in the act is the key skill. So if you can be honest with yourself, then by default, you'll be honest with others. And that's hard to do because sometimes when you're honest with others, it's not going to be to their liking. But to your earlier question, the reason that men hire me and us is because we will be honest. And that's not always going to be the nicest thing for them to hear, but it's going to be nice, well, kind long-term, but not nice short-term.
Yeah, the being honest puts you into that if in doubt, zoom out, to change your perspective.
Yeah.
So it helps you get into that.
Yeah.
So coming away from the big feats of the ultras, what are some examples of everyday hardships you put yourself through?
You and I went for food before this, food and coffee. And I spoke about how threaders I am with Instagram. I think I've now about 1,500 posts on Instagram. Average 3 to 4 a week. I mean, now we do 7 a week. But to the greatest extent, it'll be an average of 3 a week. I dare anybody to scroll right back to day 1, week 1. And then commit to turning up, creating and pouring your heart into writing a piece of content, being vulnerable about yourself, putting pictures behind the scenes in your life, and to schedule it 3 times a week, and then do that for however many weeks that equates to, multiple years, best part of a decade. Anything that you want is going to be an active endurance. It's never going to come overnight. And people can listen to that and be like, oh, you fucking post on Instagram, your life's well hard. Okay, cool, fair comment. It's not really that hard to do that. However, it is a feat of, when you don't feel like it, you have to choose the hard right over the hard wrong. You have to be honest with yourself, like, how much do I want what I say that I want? And if the answer is I really want it, then you've got to do the thing you don't want to do. Building a business in 2024 is fucking wild. People don't understand how fucking wild it is. And it's going to get worse with a Labour government who's going to tax the shit out of everyone again. And being able to turn up, like hire team when you didn't think that you were ready. Have honest conversations with team when they need to have those honest conversations, having honest conversations with clients. Like the hardest thing about sustained high performance, if we're going to call it that, is never one individual act. It's never one long run. It's never one gopping gym session. It's just continuing to turn up. And as I say on Instagram all the time, it's built in the boring. So accepting the risk of being yourself and putting yourself out on the parapet and going again and again and again and again, that's the hardest thing you'll do, is doing it again on days when you don't feel like it. And when you have these overwhelming fears that you're not good enough, and you're so afraid of not knowing what's around the corner, if this is going to work, and you've poured 100 man hours and 10 grand into a fucking project and it might all go tits up. Like, it's that again and again and again and again. And again, people can laugh and go, oh, it's not that hard, do it.
It's high reps of risk, isn't it?
Yeah. And like, you try and mitigate that risk by getting better at thinking. And in my honest opinion, building a business that you truly care about is the number one self-development course in the world, because it will show you parts of yourself and tendencies that you did not know that you have. You might be risk averse, you might not be risk averse enough. You know, you might let your inner child or your emotions run your life. You might not be able to regulate your behavior under the people. Whatever it is, it's going to show you a lot about yourself, and you have to regulate that if you want to get to the intended outcome. So yeah, it's just about turning up day in, day out, doing those reps. And that's not exclusive to me. I'm not fucking anything special because I happen to run a business rather than work for a business. You know, we work with clients who are in cutthroat jobs where it's a knife fight and everyone's going for each other's job, and turning up and dealing with those stresses and pressures, and then coming home and they've got like a newborn who's screaming the house down and shitting everywhere, and their wife's fucking threaders and knackered, as she rightfully so is. And like, making the decision to not succumb to mediocrity and just become a fucking fat idiot and just give up on all your hopes and dreams and aspirations, because you can do that. You absolutely can do that, and just be a waste man who makes up excuses about why it's harder for you than why it is anybody else. And you can talk about, oh, I was gonna do this, but mate, no one gives a flying fuck. Right? Making the decision to turn up and go for it again and again and again and again for weeks, months, years, like, that's what endurance is all about. And if ultra endurance is a micro study of a macro cycle of performance, then it's just about continuing to be able to put one foot in front of the other. And if you can do that, again, by being honest, then you will go really, really far. But if you're hanging out on an ultra and you say, oh, I'm fucked, I can't keep going. Well, that's the other question. Can I physically put one foot in front of my left foot? Yes. Okay, do it again. And in parts on the MDS, I literally had to be having those conversations. You're going up Jebel Al-Lofdel, day 4, you got 93 kilometers to do. One of your tent mates has just been fucking casevaced in a helo from extreme heat stroke. And it's the biggest Jebel in the Sahara, I believe. It's like 56 degrees. You're fucking hanging out. It literally is like left foot, right foot, left foot. That's how small it gets. But if you can have that conversation under that extremity of stress, then you can have that conversation every morning when you wake up and it's dark and you're fucking knackered and you feel like you haven't slept and you've got bags under your eyes, and it's the same. It's the same, just on different timelines, in my opinion.
Yeah, as we both know, the whole purpose of regularly putting yourself in uncomfortable situations is to build resilience with getting tougher. This brings me to the quote, tough times create tough men create easy times create weak men create tough times. Which part of that quote relates to the world today?
Yeah, I think if we look at it generationally, you know, you've got the greatest generation who fought World War II, really hard men who fought for a freedom that was then enjoyed by a generation who probably didn't have emotional availability from their parents, probably fair to say. Like, if your man was like bayoneting blokes at fucking Iwo Jima, and he's probably not going to be particularly open emotionally, and that's okay. So then we get a downstream generation who have not been raised by people who were maybe a little bit emotionally avoidant. And now, as a result, we get people who are seeking comfort because they didn't get it when they were growing up as kids. So now we seek comfort. So the whole world, the whole apparatus of that is geared towards making everything as comfortable and available as humanly practicable. So I think, like, we're all aware that it's a different caliber of person that is growing up in the world that we now live in. And if you speak to, as I'm sure you've got mates who work at basic training establishments in the military, and they're speaking about the caliber of people that are coming through, they are just built different and not always in a positive light if you need soldiers. So I think we are now in an era where we've had things really quite easy for a period of time, and consequently we've gotten a little bit soft. Things are much more available and accessible to us, and the challenge is what I call it the grey zone. Like, it's still hard to be exceptional. Always will be. But it's easy to be like just okay, because most of our needs are now met. You know, people are relatively comfortable. Comfort is accessible. So unless you go into like abject poverty, which unfortunately some people are in, you kind of percolate in this isn't okay space. And I think that's where most people are, is this is just okay. They're literally like the frog that's in that vat of water that's getting turned up 1 degree at a time. And they're not realizing they're cooking alive because they're just too comfortable. And I find it fucking wild that as the human animal, the standards that we now accept for like health, like, it's like you got fucking middle-aged blokes who can't get out of a chair. I'm like, Jen, like what the fuck is going on? And I'm very fortunate in the community I've got, like being fit and robust is kind of the norm. But I realize I live in an echo chamber in a bit of a bubble. But if you look outside of that, I encourage anybody who's feeling like they're being hard on themselves, go and take a walk around fucking Asda. Just have a look at society. And that's not a holier than thou attitude, but I'm like, that's just putting your finger on the pulse of where society is at. And I do think the world is being run by C-grade students. So if you want to be exceptional, it's available to you. You just got to put a little bit more fucking effort in.
This goes into a point of, I wanted to come back to balance. So I struggle with it as well. Especially being like when you uphold yourself to high standards, you want to do the best you can. How do you find the balance between putting yourself in discomfort and being at peace?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. It's a constant work in progress. I won't pretend that I've got it fucking stuffed, mate, at all. I don't think high standards, I mean, it all needs to be a little bit more like Nala. Just fucking podcast going on, doesn't give a shit. I don't think high standards are inherently the problem. I think when the standards become what we refer to as unrelenting, so you're always moving the goalpost. And this looks like, right, saying you're going to fizz X amount of times per week and hitting that standard, but then feeling like I could have done more, I should do better, etc. Because then it just creates a standard that you can never attain. So there's constantly self-applied pressure. I use a story when I speak to clients about this. And let's pretend we've got two guys, right? Bill and Ben. And Bill and Ben both get tasked with catching the sun. They're like, right, big ask, fair one. Let's get on. Both independent. They both run 100 miles in day one, trying to chase the sun. Sun sets, and they bed down. And let's say Bill is like, right, what went well today? 100 miles in one day is fucking outstanding. Really, really happy with that. I reckon if we can repeat that or near enough tomorrow, we're going to take another big chunk out of this. So what can I do now to the best of my ability to prepare for that? Well, let's get my head down. Let's try and relax, switch off, and we'll go again tomorrow. That's Bill. Ben says, fucking hell, he sent me that task and I haven't achieved it. I still haven't caught the sun. Fucking hell, 100 miles is not far enough. I'm going to have to go further tomorrow. I'm fucking useless. I need to catch it. Otherwise, they're going to find out that I'm not capable of this job. Which one of those men do you think is going to last and go further?
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, but most of us are Ben.
Yeah.
Most of us are Ben. And we're Ben to ourselves. So I deliberately use that as an example, and I really exaggerate Ben's tendencies because most men I work with are Ben. I'm Ben. So I have to remember to be more Bill, because if you want excellence and you turn up and you have high standards, understand to the greatest extent that's intrinsic. Okay, you have the drive, the determination, and the capability to be excellent. That additional self-applied pressure is a misuse of energy. And worrying about whether or not you're good enough is a misuse of imagination. So if let's say the threshold for you to be excellent is 90%, but you're worrying to 97%, if you lose that 7%, have you really lost anything? Because that energy can now be distributed into other areas, like recovering, like spending time with your missus and kids, like having fun. Because then you're being more Bill and you're infusing future energy. You're looking forward proactively. And a lot of my study in neuroscience was about how fun and play massively increases performance, neuroplasticity, all this sort of stuff. They put someone through a protocol out in the States at Warcom, and they taught him, obviously familiar with the military grading system for Arabic, they taught him up to level 4 Arabic in 8 weeks, which normally takes years because they were interspersing that. And it was like a really controlled environment. But they show that we play to learn, and when we have fun, we're more receptive to learning. Whereas when you are in any way on the fear continuum, you will only get the thoughts you already have. So an example of that is you can be happy and distracted. You can be on your phone texting someone, laughing away while still having a conversation. You can do that. If I put a knife to your neck, are you texting? I have got your full undivided attention, and your brain is just synthesizing ways to get out of that situation, whatever you need to do. Okay. Your brain is incapable of experiencing two emotions at once. It's absolutely incapable. It can oscillate really quickly, but it can't have them both.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly anxious and constantly stressing yourself and constantly feeling under pressure about doing enough, being enough, working enough, all that sort of shit, then you're only going to get that same set of solutions, which is escaping the problem. And it doesn't care whether you're happy or fulfilled. It doesn't care about that. It just cares that you're alive. So if you were worried and stressed the day before, but you're still alive, then guess what? You're going to be worried and stressed today because it's keeping you where you need to be. If you break that circuit and you have fun, you invite some fucking play into your life, you go and, dare I say it, now and again, go and get shiters with the lads and just blow off some steam and have it like real proper belly laughs. That fear continuum is gone. You're no longer in that continuum of emotions, and you're now experiencing like joy, happiness, etc. So then all of a sudden the brain's got these novel solutions, and it's connecting the dots in a way it couldn't otherwise. And you're sitting like fucking Virgin Airlines just conceived on the golf course. Okay, we've got so many examples of where like play and fun are conducive to better high performance. That doesn't mean you can just loaf all the time. That's not what it's about. But if you can intersperse little bits of that, then to your point about high performance, that's what takes the edge off. That's what takes the pressure off. Sometimes pressure is needed, and it's a privilege that asks us to do better than we are currently right now. But that's in a very, very short, that's in a microcycle. That's 80 minutes of a rugby match. Okay, now you need the pressure. But if you put that same pressure on the players all day, every day, you just break players, management leave. It doesn't work. Eddie Jones's leadership is an example of that. It works for a short space, then backroom staff leave, players burn out, players don't want to play anymore, losing games on a streak. That's what you're seeing. And if you look at, I use rugby as an analogy a lot because I used to play it. If you look at when a team is winning, there's no tangible thing that's changed, but they start playing more expansive and open rugby, and they start playing attacking, and they're finding holes, and they're on the like momentum. We'd refer to it as momentum. All that's happening there is they're now having fun. Whereas if you watch the team who is now getting fucking battered, and they feel the scoreboard pressure, they get really restrictive, they start making silly mistakes, handling errors, missing tackles, stuff they know how to do, but the pressure has changed them. That's a micro example of how most of us lead our lives. We're so worried about losing that we choke. But then if you can just focus on what it would be like to win and having fun, all of a sudden you've got time on the ball, you're playing your best rugby, and it's just flowing. And that's where we want to get blokes to. They already have all the intrinsic skills to be excellent. How do we now help that driver forget about crashing, forget about that, and just focus on doing their best?
Yeah, the way you summed it up at when we first met each other at James Redding's immersion weekend, you said stay flexible, rigid things break.
Yep.
And as you said with the rugby analogy, you see it when England playing very well, and then you would have seen on Instagram a week before they're playing football on the beach. As part of their training. Yeah. And it taking yourself away and giving yourself that breathing space, it like breeds creativity and room for growth.
Yeah, 100%. And the best leaders know this. Even if you look into tier one environments, the kind of people they bring in to inspire change and talk about it. Unfortunately, I've got some clients who work in Wall Street, very senior positions, and they put on all sorts of stuff for them to get them out of their own heads and get connecting and get their emotions flowing, all that sort of stuff. We're in an age now where that stuff on the continuum of meditation and mindfulness through to play, that stuff is no longer esoteric self-indulgent talk. There's now hard science and empirical data that shows the benefit of it. Unfortunately, some organizations, normally armed forces, are very slow on the uptake of that sort of stuff because that's just the way it is. It's not exclusive to the UK, it's the world over. They're quite slow on that. And hopefully, though, if we look at it on the private level, if individuals are interspersing some of this into their life within the constraints of their availability, then everyone gets better. and don't expect to be given a favor by anybody from above. Just like look after it in your own time and make sure that's happening. You know, you all get, like, you talk about your time off and what you're doing in that time off. Like, you don't have to just be fizzing 24/7. Like, yeah, it's a part of it. It's a really important part of it. But like, how can we start to bake in some fun? And we speak to a lot of corporate guys, a lot of guys are under a lot of stress and pressure, and how they can continue to perform at that level towards year end and deliver on deadlines and get promotions and stuff. Like, the difference between you and the other guy is going to be how well you soak up the pressure. And you're going to soak up that pressure a lot better. And there's research that now shows this, what we call the offset effect of play, can basically mitigate neurological stress. So if you're storing a lot of stress in your nervous system, but then you're doing like really fun things, or just like having white space or doing stuff that you love to do in your spare time, your nervous system clearing that stress. So then when you turn up, it's again about repeatability. Can you turn up and do it again and again and again and again and again? And that's what we need in leaders and individuals in the world we now live in, where change is a certainty and it's at a rapid rate. We're living in volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous times, which are all really stressful inherently to a human. Really stressful. We call that VUCA. That's what we're looking for in tier 1 organizations. Can you have an individual who strives in VUCA and thrives in VUCA? And the same is true for any like corporate job. They want somebody who can make the best decision under extreme pressure. Well, the way to create that is not just to pressurize yourself when you're at home at 9 o'clock at night on the sofa worrying if you're good enough. It's to like actually fucking unplug, unwind, do fun shit. You know, we spoke about surfing earlier, you know, go and be with your mates, go fucking all that sort of stuff. Doesn't have to be this enormous, you know, 5-week unplugged to fucking the mountains of wherever. Just little pockets of pressure drains. Just bringing that HRV down. We know it works.
Yeah, it's a big release of getting yourself back to balance.
Yeah.
Big release of stress, getting yourself back to balance.
Yeah.
So when, for you, life starts to move a bit quickly and you feel yourself losing control,
yeah,
what do you do to ground yourself and regain composure?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll do is I'll talk about control. Control is a fear-based emotion. On the other side of control is freedom. A lot of us speak to wanting more freedom in our lives, but we don't realize that control and freedom are diametrically opposed. If you want control over all things, good luck. That creates a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the pressure. You're right there, mate. Don't need to wait your nap up. Yeah, so that thirst for control is what can create a lot of the pressure. So the first thing that I need to do is ask what is actually inside of my control, and then find a way to surrender to anything that's not. And I'll do this. The reality is my life's quite high tempo a lot of the time by necessity. Won't be forever, but for the season it is. So it's almost a daily practice, is doing what we call the locus of control exercise. So pen and paper in your journal, little circle, bigger circle around it. Inside the little circle, write down exclusively the things you can control. And what people think of you is not one of those. Worrying if your boss thinks you're a bellend is not one of those things you can control. The weather isn't something you can control. If you're going to run fast enough tomorrow, it's not inside your control. All those things that are likely weighing you down and causing you to worry actually go in the outer circle, which we cannot control. We can influence them, but we can't control them. So let's take running fast enough tomorrow. Right, what can I do to influence that? Well, I can make sure I get my head down on time, make sure I'm hydrated before I go to bed, sodium load in the morning, appropriate carbohydrate solution intra, you know, all that sort of good stuff, right? We can control those vectors, and that will influence the performance. But we could be running really hard and our fucking Achilles goes bang. There's nothing you could do to control that in that moment. So when you realize what you can actually control, and then you create solutions for those things, you realize, right, everything's as under control as it possibly can be. And now it's about our ability to just not claw for certainty all the time. And when you personify it, it literally is like people get stuck on a molehill. So this is the mountain that they perceive that they're capable of getting to the top of with their achievements. But they get a little bit of achievement, a little bit of performance, and they just try and stick a stake in that, and they just won't let go. And it's like, mate, you've climbed a molehill and you think you've made it, and you're holding desperately on to all the things that are there with you on that molehill. And the reason you're doing that is because you're seeing the valley floor and how far you've got to go up there. And you're like, fucking hell, I don't know if I can do that. I daren't. The only way you're going to find out is if you find the courage to let go and be like, right, well, let's just fucking have a go. Let's just find out. And that word, or those words, let go, is something I'd say to a lot of lads, is that, right, if you're feeling really stressed right now, what's something you can let go of, and just find a way to let go, and then you'll feel that fluidity come back in again. So that's a practice I do a lot, because it is a fast moving organization. Got some really cool guys in the books. I've got a team that I manage, as well as my training load, social life, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot going on, so you got to look at, right, what can I let go of right now. And when you've got people who you trust, that you've delegated to, when you've got systems in your life, when you know what your standards are and you know what's expected of you, and you've controlled the vectors that you can, it's much easier to kind of like be at peace with all the rest of the stuff. You're like, I can't do anything about that. And that's just the honest reality of it. So yeah, I visit that on almost a daily basis.
Yeah, and the circle in the middle is small for a reason, as you say, because it's most of the time when you actually have it on paper, you're zooming out, you can see it on one page. That's when you get the...
And then what you can do is, even if there's 4 or 5 things in there, just write a list on the opposing page, and then just write your solution. And if you come to the conclusion that there is no solution available, guess what? You've just answered the equation. You're like, well, there's fuck all I can do. And whilst that challenges our want to have control, it's like, well, you've got to deal with your need to have control over everything, rather than the fact you can't control it. And I challenge anybody to continue feeling stressed or angry without revisiting why you're stressed or angry. You'll just keep creating that story. And then again, it comes back to honesty. If you can be honest with yourself and say, right, can I control that? Yes or no? If the answer is no, right, then I have to be honest with myself that I'm wasting my energy by doing that. Sometimes it's easier than others, depends on the magnitude of the threat. I get it when there's big threats, when maybe you're fighting it for a redundancy package, or you might be losing your job, or there's a health issue. That's going to be much harder to deal with. But that's an unfortunate reality of the human condition, and it happens to all of us. So when you're able to say, well, hey, this is just me being a human. Maybe my standard was a bit unrelenting because I've got this massive thing going on. Again, people might think it's letting yourself off the hook, or it's fucking sloping shoulders. And it's like, well, how many more times have I got to prove it? You can do the most elite and arduous things in the world by using these systems. And any additional abuse of self, any additional self-deprecating, calling yourself an idle cunt, saying, come on, you fucking shit, I was getting it done. I've bullied myself unbelievable amounts, and I've achieved far more since I learned to stop doing that.
Final question to finish on, mate. After you've gone from this world, how do you want people to remember you?
I used to put a lot of stock in that answer, I used to really worry about impact. And now I'm like, I'll be dead, so I don't give a fuck.
Good answer.
Because it's one of the ways that I encourage myself to take risks in my own name, is that a lot of people will want to see you fail. But in 80 years, I'll be dead, so will they, so who fucking cares? And if I think they think I'm pathetic now, imagine if they found out that I didn't do the thing I wanted to do because of their opinion, then they'd really think I was pathetic. So fuck them. I'm going to die, and so are they. And it just allows me to kind of operate a little bit more, less concerned about the risks.
Well, Mark, thanks for your time. We only met recently, but we've been having good chats, and you've helped me out with coming on the podcast massively, and we've got some good stuff, and I'm definitely going to take a lot away from today's chat. Everyone listening, I'll put all of Mark's socials in the description, so have a look at that, and definitely have a look at his page. He's got some hoofing content on there. Sorry, hoofing means very good. And follow him. And then, Mark, mate, is there anything you'd like to say to listeners before we finish?
No, mate, I massively appreciate you having me on. I think your podcast is doing good things for the right reasons, so looking forward to seeing it grow, and obviously I'll share it. I appreciate sometimes when I talk, it can be a little bit esoteric and a little bit deeper than maybe people are looking for, but I used to think the same as well. I would hear people talk on that way, and I was like, to your point earlier about traits, like, oh, there's a depth there that I think I need to fish in that pond. If anyone wants to fish in that pond, my DMs are genuinely always open, not to apply to work with me or to be coached by me at all. We're quite a small organization. We're not here to just work en masse, but my DMs are always open for lads to talk to me. So if they need a chat, if they're struggling with any things I've spoken about today, my DMs are always open just for basically a virtual brew. I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, Mark, thanks for your time. And for those listening, I'll see you in the next one.